Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us here today as we discuss the opportunities that come through the power of collaboration when it comes to closing the digital divide. I'm your host, Amy Davis with Alliant Energy, and we're so excited to have a conversation today with leaders in this space from across our region, where we're going to talk about their success that they've had in the power of collaborating on this important topic. You can see here on the screen some of the content we're going to cover today, but the first thing we want to do is actually kind of help explain what do we mean by the digital divide, right? The digital divide is really thought of in how we think about access to both reliable and also, maybe even more importantly, extremely affordable high speed internet service, right? We find this is especially challenging in less densely populated rural areas. So, Wisconsin's a very big state, right? There's a lot happening outside of Madison and Milwaukee and some of our larger metro areas. And so when we think about this even more deeply and kind of really what's at the heart of how we're thinking about this at Alliant Energy is that this tends to be even more prevalent among people who are more low to moderate income. Customers in the communities that we serve. And that's really near and dear to us at Alliant Energy as our purpose is to serve customers and build stronger communities. So that's why we've really entered this conversation and why that's important to us in the conversation we're driving. So going a little bit deeper as to who the digital divide impacts, Alliant Energy, you may not know, is in Wisconsin and Iowa. And about 2/3 of our customers are actually impacted by this, right? More than 300,000 customers in Wisconsin specifically. And what's happening, and we've certainly seen this over the last couple years, is that people are really a step behind when it comes to being able to access everything from remote work and even learning opportunities like this conversation we're all a part of today. But then really thinking about remote learning, telehealth medicine, these all really rose in importance the last few years during the pandemic. And so it really highlighted the need and the role that we could play in helping to help close this divide. So when we think about the different elements of the digital divide, it goes into infrastructure, right? And that's the part that people don't see all the time. Alliant Energy has been in the infrastructure business now for more than 100 years when it comes to the energy grid. And many people don't always know that Alliant Energy actually invests in our own fiber to be able to have our substations and our employees be able to communicate with one another. And then there's the affordability gap, right? So we think about this not only from the service of being able to pay for perhaps your broadband bill every month, but then also being able to afford the latest tech, right? Which gets into the lack of device ownership. Many people may have a cell phone, but they don't have a tablet or a laptop. And if they do, maybe it's not the latest version that could run a dynamic platform like we're on today to be able to connect with others. And then the final component of the digital divide is the literacy piece, right? We all had to jump on this call 30 minutes in advance just to make sure we could connect all of the systems and access all the features a platform like this provides, and then magnify that if you don't have the access, you don't have the device, and you're not up to speed on all of the latest tech tips and tricks. Now we've got an even bigger chasm that we've really got to try to close as a community. And certainly this is not going to happen alone. Alliant Energy can't handle it alone. And any one person or company or nonprofit is going to be able to handle it alone. So we really need to make sure that we're collaborating and partnering with people who are going to be able to come together. We like to say at Alliant Energy, leveraging the power of a team to be able to really help think better, do differently to help close this divide. So before I introduce our speakers today, I want to make sure that we are able to pose a question to the group. And you're going to put this actually in the chat. And let me get my question here. I'm having trouble navigating to it. It is, when it comes to broadband access, what is the biggest challenge you think that we have as a community to overcome? So if you could note your responses in the chat, we're going to keep track of those. And as I introduce our speakers, we'll actually have them keep those questions in mind as we are able to advance this conversation today. So I mentioned this is impossible without collaboration and partnerships. And boy, do I have a great group of collaborative professionals with me here on the phone today. So let's get to it and let's introduce them all. So we're going to start with Barb Lemieux. Barb is the president and CEO.
Okay, thank you. Amy, I wasn't sure of the question that you posed. We could not hear you. Your audio went out. But as we had talked earlier, I just want to address our broadband assessment while we work on getting Amy's audio to come back on. Last summer, well, first, let me just step back. New North is an 18-county economic development region in Northeast Wisconsin. And in the summer of 2021, a group of stakeholders came together, and we really felt that we needed to better understand our current broadband situation across our 18-county region. We're 1.28 million people, but we know many of those residents were not having access to broadband or not affordable broadband. That led to a survey, and we actually did the old-fashioned paper in the mail stamp survey, because it doesn't do people any good to send them an electronic survey if they don't have access to a means to access the survey. Based on that, we were able to secure an EDA federal grant that provided us an opportunity to bring in a consulting team. The end result of that was each one of our 18 counties has their own individual broadband assessment plan. And more importantly than that, it's not just showing what are the obstacles to getting broadband. It really lays out a roadmap as to how we get it fixed, where middle mile fiber should go, where last mile should go, where repeaters should be replaced, where towers should be replaced, the internet service providers that are working in that particular area, and that identified really a method in order to get it advanced. Our 18 counties have been using those individual plans to make better decisions with their own ARPA dollars to enhance broadband. They've been using those plans to write Public Service Commission dollars. So I think the last round, our region received around $9 million to help in actual infrastructure. So it's the partnership among our organization, our private providers, our local units of government, all addressing our broadband issues. I'm going to stop there and see if Amy has her audio back.
Hey, maybe while we're waiting for Amy, we'll finish doing introductions. So I'll go, and then maybe Michelle and Matt, we can go in order. Hello, I'm Joe Kirkus. As the slide indicated, co-founded a company called Generator a decade ago. Historically, especially in the Madison area, we're known for our startup work. As we've been lucky to partner with Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation and American Family Institutes for Corporate and Social Impact in running programming, as well as the Urban League in Madison, to run programming to support local businesses, small businesses, and startups and entrepreneurs. In 2020, we were very fortunate to be invited to collaborate with Microsoft's TechSpark, Michelle and Barb at New North, and now with Matt at Bay Area Workforce, to pilot a program to help unemployed people go from offline to online to skilled to employed. In the last 22 months, that program has helped over 100 people in the Bay Area, over 2/3 of whom were totally unemployed coming in, the balance underemployed, go through a free program, no income sharing, no fee for participants, to graduate in 5 to 12 weeks with a certificate in one of the top 10 most in-demand jobs in America, with a corresponding skill in each. The idea then is to help each of the graduates, much like we might help our startups meet 50 venture firms, proceed to meet with over 50 employers to make sure that we're getting the best mix of local and national opportunities for graduates in the community to work from home, to work in the community, and to secure a new career. We're proud that the graduates are now earning well over $4 million in income annually from the jobs that they've achieved through the program. Those are dollars going back into the New North region with Bay Area Workforce now in that partnership to be local purchasing power, to be local dollars to help families not only secure a new career, but obviously build on a new future. We're very fortunate to be here to talk about these issues in the context of broadband, which is obviously the facilitating power that enables this whole effort. Thank you all for having us. I'll hand it to Michelle.
Hi, thanks, Joe. Michelle Schuler with Microsoft, and I'm actually part of our philanthropies team. And we run a TechSpark initiative that is focused on 7 communities, actually 8 communities here in the United States and 1 in Mexico. And the broadband topic is important to us because as the largest tech company, we do feel that social responsibility, not just to focus on broadband, but digital equity overall. And so I think these conversations today are great in regards to when we look at digital equity, broadband is a piece of that. It's a necessity for everybody to have. You know, I'm looking at the chats, and the chats are talking about like making sure that everybody has access. And that doesn't just mean everyone that can afford it, but what about our rural communities? What about even that affordable access for everybody? And then devices. Because if we don't have the right devices, you're not going to be able to use the access, even if it was there. And then finally, digital skilling. You know, how do we think about foundational digital skills for all our youth, moving into then our adult space, which is even more complicated, especially as we started working with Barb and Joe and looking at adults. We defined, okay, we can COVID hit and we can look at the unemployed and underemployed and we can create a program. But what about all those people that aren't even ready to get on the computer? They don't know how to type. They maybe don't know how to turn on a computer. How do we think about digital literacy when it comes to our adult learners? And that's really where we connected with Matt in the Workforce Development Board efforts that they were looking to do, and the Department of Workforce Development as a state to say, you know, where are digital equity programs? How do we look at unemployed and underemployed individuals and upskilling? And then finally, how do we elevate our existing employees so that our companies can be more innovative than they ever dreamed of being? And Amy, do we have your voice back?
I think I'm back. Boy, what a great use case now for the topic we're talking about, which is connectivity and access. So my apologies. It sounds like you heard the whole setup for the conversation and you guys have been doing a great job introducing yourselves. So
And
Can we
Matt,
end with Matt?
yep, well, Matt's one more introduction to go.
yeah,
That's for last.
keep going.
Are you okay with that, Amy? Go ahead.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Very good. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Certainly my honor to be here with you today. Matt Valakat, I'm the Executive Director of the Bay Area Workforce Development Board. We're a public nonprofit. We're one of 11 workforce boards in the state of Wisconsin. And so we provide a wide range of comprehensive workforce development services for folks that are looking to improve their situation, their employment situation, or looking to re-enter the workforce. Oftentimes that's accompanied with some form of training, vocational training, high demand industry training, resulting in the attainment of an industry recognized credential, leading to family wage supporting type job. And we have just endless opportunities for those type career opportunities in Northeast Wisconsin. We've had other challenges, and I'll talk about those here in a second. So like so many service provider organizations, the COVID-19 pandemic forced us to pivot from almost an exclusive human to human focused service delivery provision model to one that had more of a blended virtual services. And we really found three things during that transition, during that pivot process. And first, overall customer experience and outcomes dramatically improved when we're able to provide more virtually delivered services. But by the same token, some of our customers struggled immensely for a number of different reasons. And we're all going to talk about some of those reasons here today, but digital literacy skills were clearly cited as one of the primary factors leading to some poor customer outcomes during a time of tremendous economic and employment crisis. The third thing, and this was really what drove my interest in collaborating with the partners that are a part of this the conversation today, as well as some others, was that our overall customer base continued to significantly dwindle for a variety of different reasons. And we're going to talk about some of those and ways in which we've helped overcome some of those challenges here in a second. So first and foremost, you heard Michelle hit on this, Joe hit on this a little bit, Barb definitely talked about this, tremendous amount of inequities and disparities in digital literacies and access to affordable broadband. In our area, it frequently characterizes our most vulnerable populations, oftentimes posing significant, if not insurmountable, barriers to obtaining meaningful employment during a time when our employers are desperate for talent. So with record low unemployment rates in the state of Wisconsin, it's no difference here in Northeast Wisconsin, nation-leading high workforce participation rates, we fully recognize the critical importance of connecting the disconnected. By that, I mean the roughly 33% of working age Wisconsinites that are either marginally employed or not currently employed in today's workforce represent what we consider and define as hidden talent. How can we connect with that group? Whereas we've struggled recently, some of the reasons we talked about, we're going to continue to talk about. So these individuals have tremendous amount of opportunity and potential and likely desire reentry into the workforce, but for a variety of reasons, digital literacy and inferior skills being cited as one of the primary reasons, are unable to do so. So what are we doing about it? So the Bay Area Workforce Board recently committed more than $1 million developing critical partnerships with organizations such as what Joe represents, Generator, Barb's New North, African Heritage, Michelle Schuler, Microsoft TechSpark, Abaxent, and amongst a number of others, recognize the importance of providing digital literacy upskilling wrapped around with a comprehensive support services presented in a very holistic, individually tailored package and an intensive case management system to support that individual's career pathway. So super excited and honored to be a part of this collaboration. We've already seen some early indicators of success. Joe hit on that a little bit ago. And so we're looking forward to continuing this important work.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that. And, Barb, Michelle, and Joe as well, thanks for being here with us today. I thought I might kick off the dialogue here because I think it's clear to probably everyone tuning in that you guys are all well connected and you've worked with one another in different varieties over your careers. Barb, let's start with you. Share with me how you're thinking about what you're really noticing that's not working in the region when it comes to this broad topic of broadband and digital skilling.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. Kind of the three buckets that I'll very briefly touch on one would be the broadband, right? So through our analysis, we realized we had many residents that did not have broadband at all or didn't have affordable broadband. So the assessments that we went through to develop the implementation plan, we are seeing the dial move. We have much more work to go, but we are seeing significant investment coming into our region to get this addressed. The second area of focus is really on working with individuals that may not use traditional methods of learning. We know what we learned throughout the pandemic is it did disproportionately affect certain segments of our population. So how do we better reach out to those individuals, provide them with skilled learning opportunities, but as Joe had mentioned with the generator model, surrounding them with support services, the wraparound services, so that they can talk about and share what they're learning. And the model that we used was LinkedIn. And Michelle can talk a little bit more about the vast amount of resources that's available through Microsoft. The third area was really, as Matt had addressed, the hidden talent. So if we have individuals that, aren't comfortable going to LinkedIn and going into the learning modules or may not know how to do that, how do we support them with digital skills? And that's where a new program, it's just getting started. Thank you to Workforce Development Board and Microsoft. We're developing a portal, a digital hub, we're calling it, Digital Literacy Hub. so that we can place on this portal access to free resources to help them with their digital skilling. But yet we knew we needed to take it one step further and work with service organizations that, just by the nature of their work, they're already having individuals coming to their learning labs. They are coming there in person. It might be our Somalian refugees or our Afghan refugees, or perhaps soon to be Ukrainian refugees that would be coming here to learn about cultural opportunities or English as a second language. So while they're there, we then have hands-on learning through these organizations. Our pilot includes the literacy councils of Green Bay and the Fox Valley, and then being able to package up the training that other service providers beyond those two feel very, very comfortable in working with individuals to help them with their digital literacy skills. Along with that, identifying how do they get access to devices? How do they get access to free or affordable internet? So it's much more than, just online learning at that point, Amy. And I'm sure my colleagues will have other comments on those 3 buckets that I talked about.
Yeah, maybe I could go to you because Barb mentioned Microsoft. So share a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah, and I think as communities are thinking about the whole digital equity picture, I would say, one, it's not easy, but think outside of the box. So, for example, if you look at what our Microsoft Airband team did in Milwaukee, we took a 1-block radius called Lindsay Heights, and we basically extended the internet, and we offered, I think, affordable, I don't think it was free, but affordable internet within that 1-block radius. And it's great that we gave them access, but again, it goes to how do you use it? And so we were fortunate to also have Generator and the Skills Accelerator be part of that program. And so now we gave people access to devices that they never had before. And then that skill set of, how do I use this? And not just use it for playing games and searching, but actually use it to find a job. And maybe even in this post-COVID world, a remote job. I may not even have to worry about transportation or other issues that people are engaging in now. And so I think it's that think outside of the box. And that's probably the biggest thing I'm seeing when we think of connecting everyone, and what does that mean?
Joe, she gave you a shout out there. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a group of strong collaborators and friends that has been working together on trying to do cutting edge work around bridging the digital divide, for the last 2 years. So it's very mutual on the kind words to all of the fellow panelists. The dynamic for us has been, we were brought into this a little adjacently. So, Generator's participation is at the invitation of these partners today on the panel, and they challenged us to create a program in really 3 weeks. So if you ever wonder how fast Michelle and Barb will turn around an idea, it's 3 weeks. And in the context was it was June of 2020, and the unemployment rate on the New York Times front page kept falling literally off the page. And what were we going to do as a community, knowing that the game was going faster than the rules, to adapt what we could do to offer this skilling partnership? And again, the players here are the people who are delivering those resources. And so working with everyone here, we spun up a version of our accelerator that, think of like a farmer's market. And what do you want to do if you want to make a farmer's market welcoming? We need the front entrance to be really welcoming, and the signage to say farmer's market, and be in a place that people can find and be accessible. And we wanted to take that approach to how we made the pilot available to the community. So in doing what we could to reach out, it's obviously, I remember, getting on calls that this group facilitated with the entire stakeholder set in the New North to introduce the program. We're talking turnarounds of 48 to 72 hours from let's do this meeting to hosting a meeting with 30 or 40 people to say, please spread the word amongst people who are in need. And then doing what we could to take the startup mentality of making this easy to buy. Our startups, their job is to make it so when you go to their website, you can buy really fast. We wanted people who are unemployed to get enrolled really fast and easy. And so in designing the program, we were able to get 23 people enrolled, 21 graduated. Pretty quickly, we got 15, 16 of them a job. And then over the next 6 months, we got the remaining 6 a job. to fully employed. And that was a lot of learning for us on what we could do to be a part of being a tool in this digital broadband toolkit. And that ranged from, again, going from offline to online, people who were applying to the program, but maybe were offline in different ways. Some people had zero internet connectivity. Other people, as you mentioned on your slide, were having device issues. So they had some internet connectivity through a mobile phone, but that was not a sufficient platform to skill. And so what could we do working with partners like PCs for People, who take refurbished devices and make them available as a nonprofit to the community to augment what people needed to get through the program? But we were working to get hotspots. I mean, it was very pragmatic on that side of it. On the one-on-one support, the New York Times did a profile of a graduate of that program, Rochelle Cachanego, who's a member of the Menominee community, and her story was about, using this as a platform to go from unemployed in the brick and mortar world to employed in the online world. And what did that mean? Not just in terms of the skill set, but the last mile of helping people feel culturally comfortable switching careers. And I think that's maybe a topic that, in the context of this digital divide and broadband, we're hoping to introduce as a more discussed feature of what we need, which is inevitably, when people are switching careers, community and last mile support are as critical for the soft skills and the cultural adaptation of being in a new discipline as it is for the hard skills of learning, how to answer correctly, that you're skilled on the technical side. And so we really tried to augment, like we do with our startups. Hey, if you're new to being a venture community participant, what's it like to get oriented? How do we take that same sense of orientation to the skills program? So that's really what's going on in the program on top of that hard skill. And then at farmers market, you need farmers, and in a skilling program, you need employers. How do we create a really best-in-class farmers market full of the best vendors you think you need to go to? And so what we wanted to do was this strong blend of local, our most recent partnerships were via this network with groups like Schneider and Associated Bank, but also take advantage of the post-COVID work from home virtual environment to create what we believed was the first digitally enabled skilling program in the country. And the idea was that we were going to bring you those local jobs. And a lot of our people, the Green Bay Press Gazette did a feature of people who are getting jobs in the community as project managers and IT admin through the program. But if you're someone who's going through and we can get you a great career working in the community online, we want to bring that to bear as well. Absolutely. And so we've been using that platform to bring in employers who want to hire across the country. And many times they're paying 45, 50, 55K plus starting wages, representing 20, 30, 50% salary increases for our graduates, even if they were underemployed. 2/3 were completely unemployed, to go through and get one of those jobs in a new discipline. So we've learned a lot on, as you're talking about these issues. Yep, we encounter people who have no broadband. Yep, we encounter people who do not have sufficient devices. Yep, we have people who are learning digital literacy for the first time as they're seeking to get skilled. But on the flip, I want to be positive. I have gained an incredible degree of respect and conviction for people who lift themselves out of unemployment and into a new career path. And I would not wish that journey on myself, and I am amazed at the grace that I have found from people who consider themselves capable of do it, and then succeed at it. So it has been taught me a lot, and I'm feel very fortunate to work with everyone on this panel, because that I think that last mile of how we deliver these resources is what's unique to the Bay Area, and we're certainly proud to be a part of that recipe with everyone here.
Joe, I think that's so wise. I think there's a quote that says something to the effect of, talent and ability are dispersed equally across the population, but the access to be able to leverage that talent and ability, whatever the gap is not always there, right? Based on where you live, based on perhaps your background and what type of education you were able to attain, et cetera, et cetera. And so you guys are addressing many gaps. And maybe I want to pick up on that last thing you said from the perspective of you've got to fill the farmers market with great vendors, right? With companies, you have the Microsofts creating a block of access, you've got, Matt, you're working to develop workforce, but you've got to have employers. How are employers getting in the game? How are they wanting to step up and be a part of the solution so they can access all this untapped talent and people who are have all the abilities. They just need that last mile, as Joe said, to be able to maybe traverse that gap and get to where they want to go.
I can maybe start, Amy, and then pitch it to the team. First, on the broadband, we are seeing our employers very much get involved, not only in making sure that their team members have the devices that are needed to work remote, if that's the case, but really strongly encouraging the implementation of broadband. Our region, as I said earlier, has been very, very successful on receiving grants that go directly to communities and partner with ISPs. In order to do that, you do need the support from private employers across the region that are really stressing that this is a critical issue. So on the broadband topic, we are seeing our employers step up. When it comes to the generator skilling model that Joe talked about, part of that was to have the lunch and learns. So not only are the candidates that go through the program kind of discussing and meeting with their independent coaches, employers are zooming in as a part of the training sessions and sharing what it means to be employed at XYZ company. There's also the employer swarm at the end of it. So as Joe had said, we have a very good success rate of people getting jobs at the end of the program. Training is only training unless there's a job at the end of it, right? And they can put those skills to use. And so we're seeing employers really engage in that particular arena too. And then when it comes to the hidden talent through the digital literacy, we have received an outpouring of support from businesses that are saying they too, once we get this model built and we can kind of train the trainers on the utilization of it, we really do envision that this model will be very portable. So employers can use it as a part of their onboarding when they're bringing in new hires. As much as what you would do forklift training or OSHA training or other compliance training, you're also in weaving into it the digital literacy skills that are necessary. So everybody is starting from an equal competency level in that particular area.
That's great. Anyone else want to build on what Barb shared?
Sure, I can chime in on the company side. I think companies, we know that everybody needs talent. And so they've been very open to new ideas. And I think Joe even talked about the creating of programs. And how do we think, programs need funding, programs need people. So how do we think about companies and how they are hiring out of these new programs that started out as a pilot? And Matt can talk even further about how it's starting to then being thought of or adopted for driving systemic change. And how are we thinking about how it's going to affect our system? Joe, too, with the generator program, what started out as let's get people in and have companies hire is now even being thought about as an apprenticeship program. How do we think of digital skills when it comes to apprenticeships? We do a very nice job for construction and nursing and things of that nature. But how does that look for computer science and in technical roles? And then our companies are also very involved when it comes to upskilling their employees. Not on this call today is the New Manufacturing Alliance, which is also in Northeast Wisconsin. And early on, 5 years ago, when we started working together, she did a survey on IoT and Industry 4.0. And at that time, we found that data analytics was a huge skill set that was missing. And so she too is running cohorts for employees. And, more recently, we're seeing project management and cybersecurity cohorts being needed, both for employees, and Joe's seen it too on the unemployed and underemployed individuals. And, Matt, do you want to chime in on kind of what you're seeing from a regional perspective and, maybe some of your thoughts on, what these programs are doing and how they're helping as you look at talking with companies and in the programs moving forward?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that, Michelle. And I'll be brief. And I did want to touch on a comment you made earlier, Michelle, about thinking outside the box. And I think that's really been the key to the success of this collaboration. And I would argue there was no box. I've been involved in federal procurement actions in the past where by the time you get through all of the hoops and check all the boxes, and you're not nimble, you're not agile, you're not able to meet the demand of both the job seeker, the customers who are here to serve, or the employers, and ultimately the communities can suffer. And we've seen businesses close, not for lack of demand for the product, but for a lack of talent. And so we knew as a workforce board, we need to move quick. And I credit my board of directors for fully supporting this effort and these fine individuals for submitting proposals that were certainly worthy of being funded with taxpayer dollars, knowing that we're going to make a long-lasting improvement, not just in individual lives we're serving, but also to those employers that are in need of that talent, and ultimately the communities that are going to be better for it. So let me say that. From my perspective, Amy, the employer support component, not to downplay the importance, is really the simple part. For me, anyways, I was most excited what Joe and Michelle and Barb and Sabrina and others that we've been working with, what they do in terms of engaging and connecting the disconnected hidden talent, right? These are folks that oftentimes have given up looking for work because they've been frustrated and discouraged. Yet, as you pointed out, Amy, there's tremendous amount of potential and ability there, but how we make that access to this larger, broader system of services is really the key. So we had to do some appreciative inquiry on our part and say, all right, we need to better understand why the customers aren't coming to us anymore. It's easy to say, well, they don't want to work. It's easy to sit home and get rich off the government. That's a lazy person's response to what's really going on here. And so, we had to be very self-critical. And the key to our strategy is partnering with these organizations here who have street credibility, who have highest state technology that can access these populations, and they're connected already. So we're hinging our success on them. We stuck our neck out. This guy did to $1 million. And so if I'm not here a year from now, we'll know why.
Thanks so much for that. I love it. And I thought maybe I could do, while we go to our next question, I could tee up another question for folks who are on the call to be able to respond to in the chat. And the question is, when it comes to broadband access, what would better broadband service mean for your life? What would that mean for you? So we can kind of watch in the chat and see how our attendees are thinking about how impactful that would be. Certainly, Joe and Matt, you keyed in on some of the, just immediate impacts that are coming from people being able to connect all these dots. And I think, connecting the dots is so important because you guys are all stumbling into, you could look at it as a problem or you could look at it as an opportunity every day, right? Probably every conversation presents a new challenge. And so, I think for some people it feels overwhelming because it isn't just a one solution, right? We've got 4 legs of this stool. We've got the actual infrastructure, which, partners like Alliant Energy are trying to make easier, right? You've got the skilling, you've got the device ownership, and then you've got the reliable and affordable access to the internet itself. So you see an opportunity, let's call it. How do you know where to start? How do you start to identify solutions? I mean, you all didn't know each other at some point, but yet here we are today having this conversation, celebrating many of your successes. And, when it comes to new partners, what do you look for? So I don't know if there's anybody who wants to dive in first, but yeah, go for it, Michelle.
Yeah, I'll take this. So TechSpark's been a program for 5 years, focused on rural communities. So as we've worked across the United States, we've really learned a few things. It starts with inclusion. So do your research, convene your partners. I mean, there's a reason why we all work so well together, but really take some inventory and then define those opportunities. I don't want to call them gaps. Their opportunities. Then how do you move to enablement? How do you create those pilots, those programs, kind of that, like Matt said, be agile. And so really think about how can I move quickly, fail fast if you have to. But then there's always these programs like Generator and the work that Matt's doing with hidden talent that succeed. Then what ecosystem really formed around this? And that's what you see on this call today is the ecosystem that is supporting the whole digital equity story. And then how does that drive impact in the community and drive transformation? And then ultimately, you're back at what opportunities now exist again because of what was started. And so that's one thing that we've learned over and over again. It takes defining those opportunities, convening those partners, creating those pilots and programs that are fundable, that, you know, organizations, whether it's federal funding, foundational money, corporate funding, you know, so that people are like, oh, I get it. It takes funding. It takes funding and people to make it all happen. And when you can start seeing the impact it's driving and the change that it's making in society, and like Joe said, those personal stories about people just talking about, because of this new program, I was able to really do something that made a difference in my life. That's when it all comes together and really starts to bring some really good elements into a community, and why we're all, I think, involved in all that we do.
And I will add, thank you very much, Michelle, very, very wisely stated. I would just add that as we look for partnerships, it's really bringing people together that can pretty quickly define what the problem is. So where no one has time and resources to address something where there really isn't a community need to get solved, correct? And so it's that, and it's also, we describe the digital literacy program that we're building and the work with Generator and Microsoft is we were really building that airplane while in flight. Mm-hmm. So having people that are willing to take a chance. We're not going to have it all buttoned up out of the chute. There's going to be challenges, right? My staff here in the office hear me say this, improvise, adapt, overcome. And that's actually, it's a Clint Eastwood line in one of his Western movies, but I thought it was so appropriate because things don't always go as planned. So you surround yourself with individuals that, can be very creative and in figuring out when things aren't going exactly to plan. How do you pivot? How do you still make it meaningful on the other end of it? So we look for partners that kind of come out of that mindset too. We don't want to wait and study something to death, because by the time you get done studying it, the problem has changed as it's moving very, very quickly. So looking at something very quickly, coming to an agreement on what are we going to do to try and get this solved, and then we start the work.
Amy, if I may just share one cautionary tale, and it ties in with some of your introductory comments and what Barb just stated as well. I think it can be a tendency for some organizations that identify a gap in their own capabilities to try to fill that gap themselves. And I think what tends to happen, and we've been guilty of it as well, is we water down what we're really good at. And so the partnership aspect of it, sure, we could have gone out and tried to duplicate what Joe is doing with Generator, and we would have been not nearly as successful. We would have been just duplicitous. And let's employ a subject matter expert and create a synergy and a force multiplying effect that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so really the key to our organization is developing these meaningful partnerships, which has really produced some just solid results.
And just to talk to kind of, if I can close out on that one, this group is and if I had to say like one thing that I would love to, with Matt's point and Barb and Michelle, is that it was very outcome metric focused. In that we were experimenting, we were upfront about what we were learning, but we were measuring it and trying to build on it. And so we've had, just to go over the quick numbers for this partnership that we keep referencing, we've had 166 people come through the partnership in Northeast Wisconsin. Again, over 100 of them were completely unemployed. Some of them were think of like people driving Uber, so underemployed in a very real way. And 62% of the participants are women, 41% are persons of color, which when you look at the region's demographic is pretty well represented relative to the region. 77% have graduated. So 109 graduates, 25 thanks to the Bay Area that are currently in cohort that will be graduating next. 82 have been hired, which represents 80% plus of everyone who's graduated 3 months out, and 75% overall. And what we find is every month that percentage goes up. So many of the graduates are recent, think 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It just takes time to interview, get accepted, and start. That we're seeing those metrics bear out. And it has been unique in the country. This has now spread. What we started here has spread to over 15 cities, and it's really earned a lot of national attention. But it is because, going to Matt's point, these were people who were willing to be facilitative and not consumptive in how they design their partnerships. And that, I think, is a real lesson learned for me, and something we don't take for granted. But I think as we're looking at the design of how we help people go from offline to online to skilled to employed, that real digital divide bridge that we try to work on every day as a group, that facilitative outcome driven model, I think, is in the matrix of options, not one that I think we talk about enough. And to all of their credit, when I go to a meeting, it's about numbers and who we served, but it's also about qualitative. So one of our recent graduates, she was working $15 an hour, lost it. I'm sorry, she was coming back in the workforce. Her spouse had died. So we're seeing a lot of instances like that, of people who are coming back into the workforce, who are unemployed but not in a legal sense, was offered a $15 an hour job 45 miles away that she could not take for familial reasons, life circumstance issues, not involving her desire to work. And then came through the program and got a job for $45K plus in about 8 weeks. And those are issues where she's doing this because she's online. And this is someone in a rural environment. So when some people are here, I see in the comments, people talking about the importance of those last miles and the unit economic of how we make them work. I think how we think about that when people are getting jobs, working from home, and importing revenue into their communities, I think it really affects how we think about the potential for what we finance and what we value when we connect people. And certainly, I know comments have talked about what that means for kids and everyone else in the household. We absolutely see that. People are using that for studying as adults, much less for children. But just to echo everything, facilitative, outcome driven, we're very lucky to be here.
Joe, I love that you were touching on metrics there, right? When you think about both quantitative and qualitative. And certainly, I know I used to write government grants in my 20s. I know there's a lot of outcomes and show me what you're doing with our investment, and corporations have the same thing. And so, this is definitely a journey where we're in that marathon. It's not a sprint, right? And the impacts can be felt beyond one dimension, right? Each one of you here may be more focused on one dimension more than another. You're partnering together to kind of get at the whole apple. But are you finding that funders are understanding kind of the integration of that, and that metrics may look differently based on what they normally would fund, and kind of telling that impact story? Or how are you approaching that metrics conversation, right? Because you get $1 million, you want to be able to show what did you produce for that investment. How do you tackle that?
If I may just give a shout out to everyone on the call who's been willing to create new channels to do, the work that we're doing, this kind of post-COVID virtual work from home skilling work, is really, I think, ahead of its time when it comes to the federal infrastructure that's been designed for, in-person assessments and in-person skilling.
Yeah.
And then for this group to have pulled that together, again, the reason we think it went to 20 cities is that this group was willing to think differently and act differently relative to the community's needs. So I'll stop there. Beyond, this is the exact right group of people to ask that question to.
Awesome.
Yeah, and as we approach more federal funding coming out, it is so critical to understand how to create fundable programs, how to search for grants, how to write for grants, but also understand what free resources are out there. So I saw there was a comment on how do we help people learn, whether it be virtual learning, worker training. There are a ton of resources. I think COVID shined the light on the inequalities in our education system. And kind of, you asked about companies and how companies are looking at a college degree versus a non-college degree. And our 2- and 4-year colleges have been talking about badging and certification for years. And COVID only magnified the fact that we need to do more to be inclusive. And so that's where this cohort model, everybody was very excited about funding because it was different. I know Milwaukee has cohorts and maybe Madison does, but we in Northeast Wisconsin did not have that. And so bringing that inclusivity to anyone can join, there are no limitations, there's no barriers, and have that be just a door opener to getting people to focus on learning, get excited about learning, land a job, or maybe continue on to learning even further within our education systems. And so as we think about it, also, there's so many resources out there post-COVID now that were not before focused on learning new skills. We, for example, closed all our Microsoft stores globally. And that was a huge lifeline for a lot of communities, not us here in Wisconsin, because we didn't have one, which opens up a door of opportunity. So we do a lot of virtual events on how do you use Teams? How do you rock your LinkedIn profile? So how do you look? And those are all live workshops that you can ask questions, that you can do things you normally couldn't have done. I know Joe, part of the Generator Skills Program, they have D&I training. So what does that mean? How do we all think about it? Barb had done a great job regionally, and we had New North efforts and other efforts in the region to have us all think about unconscious bias and things of that nature that we may or may not all be exposed to every day.
Amy, if I may, I know we're running short on time. I just want to quickly tie in, your question and the importance of sustainability, strategies for sustainability. So too often we see these type of collaborations end when the funding ends. And so we've built in a sustainment strategy that this can be continued indefinitely. We're going to learn. We're not afraid to make some mistakes. As a funder, as well as an organization that seeks funding, we certainly appreciate that. And so, our performance metrics, everything is performance driven, to your point. It is a federal program after all. But at the same time, we can't have a one size fits all template. We have to have a more equitable service delivery model and take into unique considerations, whether it be a rural environment and the characteristics that define our customers. So it's different and it's flexible, and we can adjust it as we learn more. But we obviously don't have all the answers, but we're looking to build those.
And I would just add briefly on the broadband, going back to how do we measure and is it scalable? We entered into a contract with a service provider that you can take a real live speed test, whether it's on your cell phone or on your computer, whether you go home and you do it on your computer, and it records real time your megabit up speed and down speed. And we have this on our website. So we're monitoring how the red is shrinking and it's turning more to green as there's more investment put into certain parts of our region. Understanding we certainly have a ways to go so that everybody has affordable, accessible broadband. We then took this to the state of Wisconsin with the other regions, and now all 9 regions in the state have access to this online speed test, so they can determine to some degree the level of or lack of availability in broadband in their particular region. So we're always looking at how we share. How is it that we may create something here? We can scale it to other parts of our state, as Joe mentioned, beyond the state to many other communities. And likewise, we're always looking for new ideas to bring here to our region.
Yeah, let me add to what Barb said too. Our Microsoft Airband team just put together a dashboard so you can see every state. And then we also put together a broadband playbook. What I like about the playbook is that it gives you a timeline on when all the federal funding is coming out and when you should be thinking about it and how you develop your plan to apply for that funding. So I'll put the chat or the links in the chat so that anyone can feel free to leverage.
That's great. Thanks, Michelle. For those who've joined us today, we had a joke the speakers did before the call that my job might be to help rein us in. So we're ending at 1:00 because we could talk about this for hours. Such great innovation and things happening across these companies and more. Maybe my last question, we'll just do a roundtable as a final thought and people can chime in on this. We've talked a lot about access and learning through others and a lot of what you're all enabling through your different organizations. But how are you learning from others? How are you learning what someone's doing in Idaho that's working there? Or how are you learning what's happening in Pennsylvania that might apply to Green Bay? Because this is an ever evolving, opportunity, right? You've taken a program and taken it to 20 states. How are we learning from others? So maybe, Matt, I'll start with you and then we'll work our way around and call it a day.
Well, thank you for that, Amy. And this is definitely an area where we could stand to improve upon. And we certainly have with the Department of Workforce Development and the other 10 workforce development boards, we learn from each other, but we've also looked beyond our own borders to see what's been effective. And then we adapt that for our own purpose. So a lot of what you've heard here today really originated in conversations that we had in my conference room or Michelle's conference room and Barb, where we recognized, this was an area that we needed to address and we needed to learn more. And so, these fine folks here have taught us a lot about what we need to do. But yeah, there's definitely some room for improvement, looking across what other areas are doing and see how we can import that into our own region.
That's great. Michelle, can I go to you next?
Sure. Yeah. As a large global technology company, this is our number one focus, is how do we connect everybody with internet access and digital equity? And it's a necessity.
Joe.
One, I think that I'll do inside out and outside in. We've the cybersecurity pre-apprenticeship program that we did, and we just completed a pilot. I think it's something that's a foreshadow of what we're hoping to take from that showroom in Northeast Wisconsin with Bay Area, with Matt and Michelle and Barb, and potentially show the rest of the country, much like the original program is still doing. And outside in, we just completed a pilot partnership with Ernst & Young and Microsoft Philanthropies in Atlanta for neurodivergent talent and leaders to skill and get employed. And I learned an MBA's worth of lessons from what is possible there and the adaptations of how we need to change, but also what more hidden talent is in the region. And that's something I anticipate we'll be talking about with Matt and Michelle and Barb on our next conversations of, are there rooms for us to bring in products like that? So it's been very mutual, but my close is across 15 cities and well over 1,000 graduates in 12 months. We have just a deep conviction that there really is hidden talent, that the efforts like Bay Area has opened up for us with Generator and Barb and Michelle with these digital literacy programs and community groups is some of the most exciting work in the country. We're very grateful and proud to be here.
And Barb, I'll ask.
Yep. Yeah, Amy, I will just wrap up by saying in state, we're one of 9 regions in the state, and we very frequently meet. Formally, we meet once a month, but informally, much more than that, to share ideas. Out of state, the CEO Leadership Pledge, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Pledge, there's about 2,000 organizations. I know you're familiar with that.
We're part of it. Yep.
Yes, we are a member. And I find that platform so incredibly enriching as we continue down our diversity, equity, inclusion journey. And the third is we belong to an International Economic Development Council. So there's companies and organizations like ours all around the world, and we have the ability to share best practices and learn from one another.
Barb, Joe, Matt, and Michelle, thank you so much. I know I learned something new today. I sure hope our audience members did as well. And thank you all for your time. We know it's precious. And thanks for spending your lunch hour with us. And enjoy the rest of Idea Fest. Make it a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.